Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My guest today is Steve Picataggio. Welcome.
Thank you, Clayton. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad we finally met. I've been watching your Instagram feed for quite a while. I'm amazed by your brush technique. Thanks, man. I try to play jazz and I kind of fake it because I'm not really a jazz player, but you are a master at this. So if anybody hasn't seen what he does, definitely check out his Instagram feed, which is, what's your Instagram?
Steve Pick _ drummer.
Definitely follow him as soon as you actually do it right now. If you're watching this, do it right now. If you're listening,
let's pause now. Oh, wait.
Yeah, pause it. Your followers should be increased by 10,000. Great to have you on because I have a bunch of things that I love to learn about you. But the first question I have for you is, what was your first musical memory?
Oof, good question. My first musical memory was probably, well, definitely singing songs to the radio, with my brother growing up. And I remember thinking that if I would listen to like the oldies station, and I thought, well, if the bands were still around and they were playing live in the studio, every time I heard the radio, I assumed they were playing live.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I would always imagine listening to a Beatles song or something and they were just in the studio playing live, which obviously is not the case. Beyond that was just a middle school band. My older brother played drums before me, so I would just watch him play all the time. I'd go to his marching band rehearsals and I'd go to his concert band rehearsals and concerts and just watch all the drummers and just really observe for a long time, not really thinking anything of it, just really interested in watching until I decided, oh, maybe I should play drums too. That's where I started. It all kind of happened in that way.
Does your brother still play?
He plays for fun. He's a lawyer now. So we talk a lot about drums and music and that sort of thing. But yeah, he plays just for fun now.
So was he the first drumming influence on you?
Yeah, I took like a couple lessons with him before. My middle school in South Florida had a music camp for 2 weeks in the beginning of the summer. And I think I was going into 5th grade that I started at the music camp. And my brother okay, here's some sticks. Here's how you hold the sticks. Here's a couple rudiments, just so that when I went and we had to audition on 3 or 4 instruments. And of course, everyone wanted to play the drums. So I had to make sure that I went in and was really prepared. And, I auditioned on the trombone and the clarinet and maybe the saxophone, maybe the trumpet, but I was like, I'm not gonna play any of these instruments. I already knew, I already decided I'm playing the drums. Yeah.
Can you play any of those instruments now?
No, I can't. I had saxophone players as roommates in college. So they had their flutes and clarinets all over, and I would pick up a clarinet. I have a vivid memory of picking up a clarinet, auditioning for this music camp, and using all the air in my body and couldn't make a single sound. And I was like, this is just confirming I'm meant to be a drummer. I can't even make a sound out of this instrument.
So middle school, you were playing in music camp. Did you play in any bands back then? Did you have a drum set at your house?
I had a drum set. Mm-hmm.
Your older brother had a drum set too?
Yeah. He already had a drum set. We had a Ludwig accent drum set, piano black wrap with a metal snare drum. It was so cool. It was nothing fancy, but I just thought it was the coolest looking drum set ever. The music camp started. We got the practice pad with the bell kit that we had to take home for the 2 weeks. I don't know how to read music. I don't know anything, but they taught us it was fantastic. They taught us how to read music. They taught us rudiments. They taught us how to play scales on the bell kit. It was great. So by the end of the 2 weeks, we played a concert. So I learned crash cymbals and bass drum and triangle and all the, things you'll learn in symphonic band. By the time I started 5th grade, there's no music program in my elementary school. So I spent the entire year just maybe taking a few lessons or continuing to hang with my brother. And then once 6th grade started, once middle school started, that's when it was school band.
Did you wind up being better than your older brother?
No.
Oh,
You know,
really?
maybe now because, you know, I have like, you know, a professional career doing it, but he played mallets really well, vibes, you know, four mallet marimba, could sight read, like all that stuff. Amazing. Like played in all these honor bands, like did all that thing really, really well. I love orchestras and percussion ensemble and all that stuff. But there's something about, and I think he too was like, oh, go audition for the jazz band. I was like, great. I'll be a drum set guy, you know? And I loved that so much. So I really stuck with that side of things. And I kind of stood out in a way too, because everyone wanted to be in the top wind ensemble and all that stuff. And I got to be the drum set guy, and I'll be in the jazz band and the pit orchestra.
Did you play a lot of musicals back then?
In high
like
school, I did. Yeah. In high school, I did the musical every year. And it was great because the drama department at my high school was on a really high level, and so is the band program. So all the students loved playing in the pit orchestra. So it was a full student pit. And because the drama department was so great, they always did pretty high level productions, you know, for high schools. That was the time where I was like, oh, this is what I want to do, you know, for my life.
Did you have any aspirations of following in your brother's footsteps as far as being an attorney or anything like that?
No. Yeah. He's, you know, it was, I always say that like drums saved my life in terms of making my life so much better. When I realized that the more work I put into playing the drums, the better I'm getting in music, but it's also improving my grades, my life in general. I was like, it was just such an obvious thing for me that like, this is what I need to be doing. And once I made that decision, it was like, no question.
So back then, were you listening to more jazz, more pop, more musical theater stuff, or was it all the above?
All the above, but really what I loved the most was pop punk music.
Oh, really?
That was my favorite music. 182, all those bands, like in the 90s going into the early 2000s, all those Newfound Glory was a band that they all grew up in my hometown. So when they made it big, they came back and did a concert. We all went to the concert, and there was a huge scene in pop punk music in our hometown because everyone's like, well, they got out and made it and went out to LA and got a record deal. So all these bands started, and it was really, really cool at the time to like, you know, I just sat in my room with the drum set and play along to records and learn all the songs that I liked. I just liked the music. So I just wanted to learn how to play them all, not knowing that that's a valid way to practice.
Were you the kind of person who had, you know, spiked hair, or were you looking as wholesome as you do now?
I had the gel with the spiked hair. I got like the frosted tips. Yeah, I had the puka shell, the band t-shirt. I was in it. I was so in it.
So no button-down shirt. And
oh no. Yeah,
I remember when I was younger, I was in like during that time I was in like a metal rock band called Evil Twins, and we were kind of the Soundgarden, Fishbone, Bad Brains kind of vibe. And you know, I had long hair. I had dreadlocks down to my back. And that's when I moved to New York in 1993, and I had my hair down. And I remember running into the guitar player for David Letterman, Felicia Collins. And she knew me back then because she actually tried to reach out to me for a gig that I couldn't do. And I don't know why I turned it down. It was a gig with her and Will Lee. I'm like, what? How did I turn that down? What's wrong with me? She saw me later when I had my hair cut. She's like, wow, you're all wholesome now. And but deep inside, I'm still listening to Bad Brains. And it's funny, when I listen to a lot of musical theater after a while, I just need to break out. I need to just play something else. And that's what I usually, like my fallback is like Spoon Man. Mm-hmm. I don't know if after a while playing jazz, you just like, you know, I just want to play some, you know, Blink-182. Do you actually go back and play that stuff?
Oh yeah,
really?
And I listened to it lately. The last couple of years, I spent a lot of time thinking like, oh, I used to like that music. That's music I used to listen to. That's music I used to like. Now I'm this other thing, and as I get older, I just think like, no, I love that music and I'm going to continue to love that music for all these reasons. After I play a jazz gig, or if I'm in rehearsals for a show, that music is just going on in your head, whether you want it to or not. I got to put on some Paramore, or I got to put on
Yes.
something heavier and just get into that vibe for the sake of enjoying it. We're always studying music and working on music for a gig, or working on music for whatever reason. We forget that we could just enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it, not for any other reason.
Blink 182 and Paramore and Green Day. I play a lot of club dates, weddings and corporate events, and sometimes these couples are like, "Can we have all the small things, please?"
Yes.
I'm like what?
Yeah.
So I have to learn that stuff. I never really played it before, but it's not easy to play. I mean, it's
No.
there's some great drum parts on those kind of things.
Yeah, I think so. And I teach a lot of kids who want to learn songs from all sorts of bands and artists. And, it's kind of my responsibility to feel like I could teach that stuff too. And also, there's a few bands that, a 12-year-old came in and was like, "Oh, I want to learn this song." And I'm like, "Cool, I don't know it at all." You look it up, you're like, "Oh, this is really dope. Like, I love it." And now I'm like listening to, whoever, Harry Styles or whatever, stuff that, or even, that's nice. That's good music. Sometimes you find stuff you're like, I don't even know who this is. Now it's like one of my favorite songs or artists.
There's so many new artists out that people, at least of my age, don't really know about. But if you're introduced to it, it's like, oh, this is cool. But anyway, it's so interesting to hear that from you, because I would think that people that have gone through music school and like study jazz, and they come out and they're like jazz purists. It's like, if you're not swinging, I don't want to hear it. Just like, if you have your bass drums over 16 inches, then get that out of here. Were you ever like a jazz purist at any point?
For sure. Yeah. And when you're in music school, it's hard not to be. You're around your peers and fellow students and faculty, all day, every day for 4 solid, dense, intense years. For me, I really wanted to be a good drummer. I really wanted to be a good jazz drummer, good jazz musician. I wanted to know everything. And I spent all day, every day, focusing on that. When I'm playing a jazz gig, that's all I'm thinking about, of course, because the last thing I want to do is sound like a jazz drummer playing rock music or a rock drummer playing jazz music. So I feel like when I put that hat on, I'm in that zone. But just in my day-to-day life, like, I love listening to all sorts of things if I like it. Like what I was saying earlier is, if it's good music, I'm going to listen to it. You think about Taylor Swift, or insert any pop artist, as drummers, like, think about all the drummers that have played on her records. Like, man, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. When you really get into it, you could hear really, really good music. Not everything might be for you, but I'm not going to pretend like I don't like certain songs. When I talk to certain friends who are not into any other music except for what happened between 1939 and 1956, I'll get into that too, of course, but you have to know your audience a little bit. That's something I learned in New York. When I started to really get into the musical theater thing and the jazz thing, I realized, like, oh, I'm playing with this artist. That's not what I do. That's just something I'm doing today. That's just this week's gig, but I'm really just a jazz drummer. I'll go play with this actor on this cabaret gig, but I'm really a jazz drummer. And I kind of had to fight that a little bit until I realized, I was like, no, these are the things I do because I love doing them. And I'm actually really consciously and intentionally seeking these gigs because I love doing them. And I think I'm meant to be doing them. So it's not just something I'm doing now. This is who I am and this is what I do. And the same goes with the music I listen to. Is I like all these bands. I like all this music. I like Oscar Peterson just as much as I like Ben Rector, singer-songwriter that I really like, or Sarah Bareilles. I would stop everything I'm doing and go play a gig with her, any day. That's phenomenal music.
I asked another drummer if, because he loves Paramore, and another guy who loves that stuff too. I forgot what the other band he really loves. If somebody offered you, say, for instance, I'm not sure how much you really love Phantom of the Opera, but say, for instance, Phantom of the Opera were to come back and run another 20 years, and we wanted you to be the drummer as opposed to playing with Sarah Bareilles, what would you choose?
Yeah, I'd pick Sarah Bareilles every time. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
20 years with Phantom or a year with Sarah Bareilles?
Yeah, I would take that year for sure. Yeah. Well, 20 years of Phantom, that's not going anywhere. I could always circle back and try to get my way in the gig.
There you go.
Well, I loved her show Waitress a lot. And then I saw her at Into the Woods and I was like, oh, she's the best. Like, I like her pop music so much. And then you realize, like, she's a similar artist, whereas, like, she's not just this one thing. It's cool.
So you were in marching bands in high school?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I was
or
obsessed.
The marching band. Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was South Florida. I grew up in South Florida, and Florida, I wouldn't say as much as Texas, but similar to like Texas and the Midwest, like big marching band, big drumline scene. I watched all the DCI videos and the Lot videos. I'll still circle back and be like, how's Santa Clara Vanguard doing? It's really cool, especially now that my ears are better than they were in high school. It's like, wow, this is insane. In high school, I was so obsessed with drumline and marching band, and I played the tenors, which is
really
big. Yeah.
Well, it's 5 drums or more?
5.
Jesus.
They're heavy, man. I'm not the tallest dude either. Running and going to the gym and making sure I was in shape because, in the Florida summer, you're carrying this heavy drum in the middle of the afternoon and you want to be able to do it.
How big was your drum line in high school?
Yeah, we had, it kind of fluctuated, but it was always like my senior year, we had like 5 snare drums, 3 tenors, 5 basses, a couple cymbal players, like the front ensemble. A lot of friends of mine like went and marched drum corps and got really into things like that. I did not, but I loved it so much. I was so into it. And then as soon as, November rolled around and the drums went away, I was like, okay, that's done. Like, moving on to, when's the jazz band concert? And, let me make sure I'm learning my solo and ensemble snare drum piece. It was really nice. The high school program was really intense in that way that I got to, do it all.
You went to college after high school. And which college was that?
The University of North Florida.
Is that where
Jacksonville.
you met? Is that where you met Ulysses?
I did meet Ulysses there. I went to UNF to study with Danny Gottlieb, who at the time was living in Orlando and teaching at UNF in Jacksonville. And my high school band director at the time was a great jazz musician, saxophone player. He's like head of the jazz department at University of Georgia now. But my sophomore and junior year, he was the assistant band director at my program. And I got really into playing in jazz band and really into drum set and got really focused. And he brought me like records all the time and would like, check these out. Like I'd bring back the 10 CDs he gave me. He'd have 10 more for me to check out kind of thing, and got me really into it. And he was the one that said, oh, you should check out this. Cause I was like, oh, I want to go to Florida State University or I want to go to University of Miami. Cause those are the 2 schools that everyone knows about in Florida. He's like, yeah, Miami, you would be cool, but check out UNF in Jacksonville. I was like, I don't even know what that school is. I have no idea. And I looked into it and heard a big band record that the school had put out. I was like, this is amazing. Got in touch with Danny and went up to his house in Orlando, took a lesson with him. And it was amazing. He studied with Joe Morello. Obviously, he's one of Joe Morello's one of his most famous students, and we got into all that technique and we had a really, really great lesson. I remember my parents drove me up there and they were like, I didn't know you knew all that stuff. Like, it was like one of those really cool experiences, just getting to sit down with him and talk about music. And he said, so I'm going to accept you into the school. I was like, oh. He's like, send in the CD of your playing if you have one, and we'll use that as the audition. But I want to accept you as a student for next year.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, amazing. I really wanted to go and study with him. So I did that and really dove into his thing. And I think it was the like early spring semester of my first year. We had just come back from break, and that's where I met Ulysses. He's from Jacksonville, where the school is. He was just in town playing a gig with some local musicians. I think Jimmy Cobb was a guest artist at my school that week. So we went to see him play the concert, and then everyone's like, oh, we got to go see this drummer. He's studying at Juilliard. He lives in New York. We got to go. And I was like, we just saw Jimmy Cobb. Shouldn't we let the dust settle? But we went, like everyone went. And I just like, before I even opened the door, it was like this little cafe out by the beach in Jacksonville. And before I even opened the door, I already heard the music. It was organ trio. And I was just like, what is that? And I opened the door, and the level was just, through the roof. And I was like, what is the rides? I never heard that ever, I'm still figuring it out. I haven't heard live music that much, really, if you think about it, when you're a freshman in college, like, especially growing up in Florida, there's not a lot. So that was like the first, and I was like, is that New York? Is that what New York does? And so the gig was amazing. Right after the gig, I walked right up to him, and I didn't even think. I was like, can I have a lesson with you? And he just like had this huge, he's so nice. You know him, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the nicest. He was like, yeah, sure. Like, you want to come by tomorrow? I was like, yeah, great. So I got his phone number, called him the next day. We set up a lesson. I went to his house and took a lesson, and it's like a 2-hour lesson or something. And it was amazing. He showed me all this stuff, and he was really honest and really kind. By honest, I mean was like, this is the stuff you need to be working on. But really kind and really inspiring. It really completely changed my life, because I would take lessons with him every few months. So I'd have my lessons with Danny like every week, and I'd be really into all that stuff. The Joe Morello stuff, studying big band drumming, studying the history. And then when Ulysses was in town, I would go out and take a lesson with him too. And that's a really early time for me to realize the importance of mentorship and how you can kind of really seek that from a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. And I always say that, Ulysses was at the top of the list for sure, among others, but he really helped me get there. So super important person in my life for sure.
Yes, and we're talking about Ulysses Owens Jr., by the way, for those people that are listening. And yeah, I met him because he was checking out some of the things that I've been posting about Broadway drumming. He's like, man, it's a great idea. And this, here's some ideas for you. And so, he's a great person. I definitely watch his Instagram feed too, because just watching him play,
I could call him anytime and text him anytime. He's always gets back to me, and always great advice, always something great. Yeah.
He has a book out that I bought. I haven't checked out half of it already. It's basically everything kind of you need to know about being a musician. It's more about just playing drums. And then again, that's part of the reason why I'm doing this, is more to being on Broadway or being a professional musician in New York City than just knowing how to play drums. I mean, there's a whole other host of things that you should know. Like if you get asked to play a gig, it's like, yeah, I could play the gig, but there's like 10 other questions that you should ask before you say,
yes.
It's funny when people text you, it's like, are you free Friday?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. Anyway, his book is something that people should definitely check out, or what it's called, but I'll have to post that in the notes. So he mentored you in the University of North Florida, and then you graduated with a degree in what exactly?
Jazz performance.
Okay. And you moved up to New York after that? Did you go to grad school?
I moved to New York in 2011, basically 2 weeks after I graduated at my undergrad. I moved up to do my master's at NYU, also in jazz performance. I studied with Billy Drummond there. It was amazing experience studying with Billy. He really, took my playing and everything to a completely new level. But I moved to New York to be in New York. For the first 2 years in grad school, it was really great. At the time, I was like, I want to play Broadway and I want to play jazz. And I realized that that's not the case at all. There's a good chunk of drummers who are interested in doing both, but I had to find them for sure. I just assumed everybody. And that was the thing I was saying before, is just like kind of have to navigate through that and find your people, because there's definitely a lot of like, oh man, what do you want to do that for? It's like, that's what I want to do. You know,
you started becoming I guess, a band leader in New York. Did you find it difficult to go from behind the drums and lead? Well, I guess you can't really say lead from behind because you're leading the band, but
yeah.
The transition from being a student to a band leader, what was that like?
It was interesting. I think a lot of my favorite drummers have been band leaders. Matt Wilson, Jeff Hamilton, some of these guys that are around, they are drummer led bands. Ulysses is another one. Billy's another one. I would go see all those guys play live as leaders, and I learned a lot. There's some things that are just not different. Obviously you just need to play the music. You don't have to take a drum solo on every tune to let the audience know that you're the band leader. However, there are some things that you get to do that maybe you wouldn't get to do if you were playing with a singer or playing with a piano player who was leading the trio. But it's all the non-music stuff. It's what songs do you want to play? What arrangement? How do you want the arrangement to be? Who do you want in your band? Obviously, you have to go out and find gigs and do a lot of emailing and trying to book stuff. And people don't really know who you are. At the time when I was trying to be a band leader, it wasn't like, oh, I'm part of this famous trio, and obviously we're going to sell out this room, no question. It was like me trying to find rooms that maybe already had a built-in audience, and I could try to grow that way. I put out a record where I got to pick all the tunes I wanted and the people and the arrangements and kind of shape it in my own way, and then try to go get gigs that way. So it was fun for me to play at a couple of venues for the very first time that are somewhat well known. I was the leader. It was kind of bizarre, but it was fun for sure to do. I don't do it a lot lately, but when I get to, I really like it.
What's the most difficult part about being a band leader?
You always have to ride the line between, this is what I want, but also we're cool, right? Like we all on the same page, getting everybody to feel like they're also collaborating in their own way. Sometimes I do the latter too much, in the beginning, and be like, well, what do you think? What do you want to do? And it's like, well, I'm the leader. So it's like, hey, we're going to play this tune like this way. Take the intro here, boom, 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 whatever you got to do in terms of preparing the arrangements. And then beyond that is just letting everybody play and do what they're there to do. But for sure, the difficulty as a drummer is, I don't play a chordal instrument. I don't play a melodic instrument. I composed one tune once over 10 years ago, and I like playing it. It's fun. But most of the stuff I want to do is play. When I'm band leading, I really love piano trio. So I'll find piano players I really like playing with and who are all on the same page. And you could do a lot less thinking that way because everyone's coming from the same place. But I'm not going to say, all right, I'll take the first chorus or whatever. It's like the piano player still is going to do the majority of the soloing, etc. But you figure it out.
So jazz performance at the University of North Florida, jazz performance at NYU, you graduate, you find a way to make your own record. It's 2013, 2014. Did you say, you know what, I want to be the next Ulysses Owens Jr. I want to be the next Matt Wilson. So was your goal to be the cat in, as they say, in New York? Since you had that whole Blink 182 in your background and the spiked hair, frosted hair.
Yeah.
But now you're playing jazz. Was just your focus playing jazz? Or did you have other musical interests?
For sure, for a while, it was, I want to be the next cat. I want to be on all the gigs. I want to be, 7 days a week. I want to play every night and run from thing to thing. And I did that a lot you might have an early gig and then you're downtown. So you'll run over to Birdland to see whoever, and then you'll go over to Smalls and run around and see everybody. And I love those nights. I did that a lot. Now I'm a little older and I have a 3-year-old daughter and a family. And, my wife and I talked about a lot. It's just like, I got to go see this music. I got to go see whoever tonight. I'm just going to go. It's going to be one of those vintage nights. I'm going. And we support each other a lot in that way. Obviously, when you're a little younger, you could just, I've been teaching all day and now I'm going to go out at 7 and see music till 2 a.m. and try to get as many gigs and do that hustle. I realized that I love playing with singers, and whether it be Broadway singers or jazz singers or pop singers. And that made a huge shift for me. And that's when I really realized it's like, this isn't just something I like doing, or this isn't something I'll do tonight. This is something I'm meant to be doing. And this is something I want to be doing. And so that's when the cabaret thing started to become, I was like, oh, this is a scene I didn't really know a lot about. I just figured, oh, cabaret is like, you'll go play a concert of Broadway tunes and it's just a concert, but no, it's a whole thing, and I really like doing those gigs. And the first time I played one was with this actor, Leslie Margarita, who has been in a lot of Broadway shows. I did not know her when I first got called to play with her. I was just referred by a friend. And, she was in Matilda at the time. She's super funny, super incredible musician, great singer. Her music director puts together a great band. And that was really my first introduction into the musical theater thing in New York, was playing with her.
And you played on her record that came out in 2013, 2014?
Mm-hmm. We had been playing together for a few years before we did the record, but it was basically that show that she recorded was the first show I did with her. I think it was like at the Cutting Room was the first time I played with her. And then she started booking a lot of gigs at 54 Below. So we did a ton of 54 Below gigs. We did a couple things out of the city. And it'd be every couple months or so, it'd be, we're doing another one. And that really helped shape my playing in a new way because, I'm being an accompanist, I'm playing with a singer, I'm reading the arrangements. It's not jazz, but I'm using all these jazz, the sensibility I know from being a jazz drummer. I was like, oh, I could apply all this stuff over here. Why am I thinking this is a totally different thing? You still have to play good time, good feel, be supportive.
I know that you played with a group called the Wicked Divas. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that.
So I started playing with that group a couple of years before, and it was with mutual good friend Ryan Sharar, music director, who I had played with on some other gigs. He called me to play a couple concerts with a group called Wicked Divas. When I looked it up, it was all pops concerts with orchestras, and it'd be a couple actors who have been in Wicked playing various Broadway tunes, but also the hits from Wicked. And I thought, am I going to play with an orchestra? Like, this is fantastic. I'd love to. But at the time, they took that kind of idea and made it for small group. So it was piano, bass, and on stage with 2 actors playing a variety of Broadway tunes, a bunch of Wicked songs. And we had a handful of dates at, performing arts centers. The very first one was there was no rehearsal. We just rehearsed on stage during the sound check and pieced it together and played the concert. And then we did a bunch of dates out of a new venue in New Jersey. And then we played at the Ridgefield Playhouse, which is a beautiful venue in Connecticut. And I was like, this is the best. Playing those shows was really a completely life-changing experience for me because it really took all the things I love about music and about playing the drums and about playing music, and it was all in one thing. And I realized that my first love is being an accompanist as a drummer because I'm accompanying these songs. I took 0 drum solos, and that was great. I didn't need them. I don't want them, but I got to play these tunes, and Ryan did a really awesome job arranging them and writing out incredibly clear, amazing, great charts as, working with him before. And I learned so much playing with him, just so clear, so easy to play with. And it was a really, really awesome time for me. I realized that I was like, I'm the most happy doing this over anything else. Yeah. Because there's some times where you have to play a jazz tune, maybe like a thoroughly modern Millie song that needs to feel like a big band. But guess what? It needs to feel like a big band. It's like, I know how to do that, and insert whatever other style or feel or song and new stuff, older stuff. And it's just so fun to get to do that kind of thing. And yeah, I love it.
Your past influences can shape your future performance. It's kind of like the opposite of the stock market. Should I ask a good post there?
That's a good quote. Yeah.
Because you learn from playing Blink 182 songs, Paramore songs, anything from 1959, Coltrane and Tony Williams stuff, to playing, Mamas and the Papas. And you can boil all that down into whatever is presented to you. If it's going to be something that's part of Wicked, all those influences are probably, again, I haven't seen that show yet, which is unfortunate. But, there are shows that combine a lot of different styles that, if you know how to play a big band, thinks, I can apply those skills to this. Because I remember one time, I tell this story all the time, when I was subbing at Evita, and there's a song called "And the Money Kept Rolling In." It's in 7, and I was like, wait a minute, I played 7 before. In fact, during the middle of Tom Sawyer, that whole part is in 7, and I played that, when I was 16 or 17, whenever that came out. And I used to play it all the time. So I was like, if I can play Tom Sawyer, I can play this, even though it's completely different music, but it's like the same kind of, you just apply those different ideas to whatever you're playing at the moment. Yeah. So Ryan Sherrar, who I'm in contact with almost on a daily basis because we text each other about stuff, he was part of the Wicked Divas, but he also brought you into the Four Phantoms. Tell me about the Four Phantoms and what that's all about, and what kind of things that you guys do.
Yes. So the Four Phantoms gig started about 2.5 years ago for me. Ryan had called me and asked me to be a part of it. And I was incredibly honored and really thankful to get the call, and was excited to do it. And it's a similar thing to the Wicked Divas concert in terms of in this case, it's 4 actors who have been the Phantom. So that's kind of the draw. And a lot of Phantom music, a lot of music from, they've all been in other Broadway shows. So a lot of reading. But it's a very tightly knit, worked out show that has started before I arrived. So I got, the music. I got like a video to study the music. And he said, if you'd like to do it, like, let's meet and we'll play through some of the songs. I guess it was like technically an audition, but he definitely said, we're kind of revamping some things, or we have an opportunity to bring you in to do this. And, there's going to be a lot of dates coming up. So we went through the music. It was great. I had already worked with them before on the Wicked Divas thing. I've worked with them a lot on concerts in Carnegie Hall and some other like cabaret things. So I knew how he works as a conductor and as a music director. So we got together. I felt prepared to play music, and we played through it. I sat down with the team. We sat down in a meeting and like, great, we'd love to have you. They emailed me a bunch of dates, which was incredible because this was only 2.5 years ago. It was in December, and everything is freelancing. Get the call to do the gig, great, move on to the next thing. This was, you're going to be the drummer in this group. And it's an amazing feeling. As you know, you've been the drummer in some groups, and it feels great to be part of a thing and to be able to feel, obviously, the first 6 months to a year was, I want to nail this book. I want to play it the best I could play it. And I want to be able to offer the best from me so that everybody could do the best for them. That's always my goal. And in that case, it's like, the better I do, the better everyone's going to feel about what they need to do. But then beyond that, you get to feel like you have a lot of ownership over your book and your involvement in the group, musically. And it feels amazing to be able to feel like what I'm playing it's evolved into a way that's like, wow, I get to really make this my own. It's definitely shaped my playing in a new way. And we get to play some cool venues. We get to travel a lot. It's not long traveling, which I really like. I always say in New York, there's in-town musicians and road musicians, people who spend the bulk of their time in town playing in the city, and people who play 200 dates a year on the road, 200 nights on the road, rather, just constantly out on the road. And I consider myself an in-town musician. So playing a gig like this and, having a 3-year-old and having, my students and wanting to maintain my gigs, it was like, cool. So travel, like, what are we thinking? Like, are we out for a month? Like, they're like, oh no, it's like, 3 to 5 days, go out to a couple gigs, come back. I was like, oh, perfect. I love it. I'd be happy to be able to incorporate that into my life. And, the travel thing has been really fun, and you get to see some cool places, get to see some cool venues, and deal with backline drums and, all fun things that, honestly affect your playing in a positive way. Even if you get thankfully, knock on wood, I get nice ensembles and all the things I need for the most part. But sometimes you get something you're like, cool, this is a bit of a curveball, but we'll make it work.
Well, let's talk about some practical things, because I tend to like to ask questions that people may not ask and give information that people may not even think about. You talked about backline. Mm-hmm. When you are asked to do a gig with the Four Phantoms or the Wicked Divas or anybody out of town, what do you look for in those kind of gigs? I know that you have to have a list of the drums and the cymbals and the throne and the bass drum pedal. What should drummers know that they probably haven't thought about if they're going to do something like this? And what have you learned over your career that if you could tell somebody, you should probably make sure when you go out of town with somebody that you should have at least this?
Be as specific as you can. That's the best advice I can give. And know the things you need for the gig you're playing. So if I'm playing a cabaret gig or musical theater gig on the road, I know I have a rider sitting on in my notes on my phone. Musical theater rider. Boom. I need these things. The drum sizes, the brands. I need these heads. I need them to be new. I need these stands, these types of stands. You can't be too specific, because if you're remotely vague, you're just going to get whatever. And if you're cool with whatever, great. However, if I ask for an 18-inch bass drum for a jazz gig and I get a 22-inch by 18-inch bass drum, it's like, but on the flip side, if I'm doing a musical theater gig, I need a 20 or a 22. I need, a 12 by 8. I need a 16 by 16. I need all boom stands because I got to put stuff in all kinds of things. If I'm playing a jazz gig, I need 3 single braced or straight cymbal stands. The 18-inch bass drum needs to have nothing inside of it. Like, all these things I have worked out. So if I hand it to a venue, chances are they could look at that and go, okay, I know what to do. So the more specific you are, the better. And know what drum brands you like and why. I love Yamaha drums on the road. I love Ludwig drums. I love Gretsch drums. I'm not endorsed by any of these companies. But I love these drums for specific reasons, mostly in that their hardware is really easy to use. The drums are really easy to tune. They look awesome, which, sorry, you're on stage. You want to make sure you have a drum set that you're not like, like, you know what I mean? Like, the finishes are cool. It's great. They're iconic drums, and you're like, oh man, no matter what I do, you could always tune a drum to make it sound the way you need, but sometimes it's just, certain drums, you just go like beep, 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 done, perfect, and when you're on the road and a very quick sound check and maybe no sound check, you have to know that you could get what you need out of it. I list some brands on my riders. If I'm not bringing my cymbals, I ask for specific sizes. I am endorsed by Zildjian, so they need to be Zildjian, but the sizes, the type, etc., so that you're getting the things you need. There's no room for interpretation.
When you go out of town, you've traveled a lot. There are also other things that you should probably know about traveling. When somebody says, are you free on Friday night for a gig? Well, it depends. It depends on how much it pays. When do I get paid? In what format do I get paid? How long is the gig? What am I wearing? What's the music? Who am I playing with? How long does it take to get to the venue? Can I park? Am I bringing drums? That's just, what is that? I don't know. That's 10 questions already. When you travel, what are some things that people should? I learned a lot by being on this recent tour of Hadestown. I was subbing for the drummer on the tour. And there's a lot that I learned about being in different beds in different hotels every week. I didn't realize how important that is, especially at my advanced age. What are some things that you would tell people to know or think about if they're asked to go out on a tour or a show?
Be organized and have a plan and stick with whatever routines that work for you. Those are non-musical, non-drum things. Those are just things that I have found to be helpful for me, that keep me happy and sane and relaxed when I'm on the road, because you get somewhere and you might stay at a really awesome, cool boutique hotel. And sometimes you might stay on the side of the highway. And I always say,
like on the set, I'm just kidding.
As long as everything's clean and everything is what it needs to be, I'm happy. But beyond that, I am really into having a very organized suitcase. I have all the things I need for every single day I'm there. If you got to wear a suit, know how to pack a suit so that when you get to the venue or you get to your hotel room, you can immediately hang it up so that it's not like a wrinkled mess. And little things like that. I'm into packing cubes and everything is in a container and everything is where it needs to be so that I can get through TSA really easily. I can get to my room really easily. I don't get there and go like, oh, my stick bag. No, like everything is exactly where it needs to be. Every once in a while, I'll like, oh, I left that charger at the hotel. But I try to have everything in a place, keep, it just keeps this, the sanity like in place. So for sure, keep a routine. Like if you like to wake up at a certain time, wake up at that time. Go grab some breakfast. Go meet with the people you're playing with. Go find a thing to do. Do something that's going to help you feel ready to go play the gig. It's not always, oh, I got to shed in my room for 6 hours before the gig. It's like, dude, okay, but you're in Chicago for the first time. Like, go check out Chicago a little too. Like, go, the first time I went to LA, I made sure to go check out, I'm very obsessed with coffee, but I made sure to go check out some coffee shops that they don't have in New York. These little things, a thing to put on your own calendar so that, when call time, hits, you felt like you did something productive, but maybe did something fun for you because, traveling is different. It's a different thing. You also have to, it's really difficult. You have to take all these flights and wake up, all these things that if you don't also try to enjoy it, If you don't enjoy it, then don't do it. Just say no, just stay home. Like that's cool too. But if you enjoy it, then you have to kind of take advantage of some of those opportunities, because traveling musician, it's a different thing. It's a different way of life, you know? So I always say, and I always think of like, okay, what's my plan for today? And, you know, on the Four Phantoms gig, there's like 12 of us that travel together between crew and musicians and actors and stuff. So, you know, I'll get to the venue. It's like, do you find some coffee today? It's kind of become a thing, you know? And then beyond that, like technical stuff is, if you need to be somewhere at a certain time, be early. The classic things is, don't be that person who people are waiting on, and kind of get a sense of, okay, well, the venue's here, the hotel's here, they're going to pick us up at this time. Make it as easy for yourself as it is on other people too, in terms of what's the schedule for the day, understanding all that stuff, you know.
You got to be there early, because sometimes they may leave without you. Be there early because you don't want to get left behind. Sorry, that's kind of, it's a really important thing. And all those things that you just said make perfect sense. And I think it's just knowledge about the non-musical things that can either make you or break you. And I tend to do the same thing that you do when it comes to going to new places. I was in the Bahamas for a weekend. I asked the car service driver, where can I go to get food where the locals go eat? Because I'm not, you know, they probably do have KFC there. Why would I want to go to KFC or IHOP? I want to go where the locals go. And he told me that stuff, and I went and I had so much fun. And it's really important to experience these things, because when am I going to be back in Nassau again? I have no idea.
I so agree. I had a gig in, speaking of Nassau, it was at the Atlantis Hotel last November. It was this huge like celebration for the hotel. I was there for 36 hours. I was playing with this band, the Hot Sardines, a band that I play with sometimes and tour with sometimes. A jazz group, really fun, great group of humans. We were there for literally one gig. We flew in Friday afternoon. We put our bags down. We're like, see you at the beach in 5 minutes. We all went to the beach and sat on it's November. Like, yeah, we're going to go sit on the beach before the gig, before the rehearsal. You know what I mean? Like, the drums will be fine. Like, they'll be ready. You have to find those moments. You come home after a trip like that and you're like, that was awesome. What an experience.
It was November?
And it was November. Like, who's going to the beach in New York in November? Literally no one.
That's great. Oh, man, I loved it down there. What are some things that people should know about becoming a successful musician in New York?
The first thing is to know that New York doesn't necessarily want you or need you. And I mean that in a good way. You have to really want to be in New York City. You have to really like New York City in order to come here and try to find success in New York City. New York City, it will be fine whether you're there or not. You know what I mean? It's an amazing, amazing place. It's a crazy place. It's very unique. It's very different. But for me, I was like, I want to be a successful musician in New York City. So before I lived here, I visited for like 4 or 5 days, took a couple of lessons, went out to a couple, jazz clubs, and saw some music, met with some people, checked it out, ate some food, checked out New York City as a place to see if I liked it, which I did, thankfully. And that's why I'm still here 12 years later. But, that's a really important thing. I think sometimes people come to New York and they're like, I don't know how you do this. It's like, well, maybe New York isn't for you. But definitely step one is kind of building that like love for your, it's going to be your home. You have to really like it. You have to really love being there and dealing with all the things you have to deal with. So beyond that is, you have to know how to get around New York City with your drums. For me, I have worked out a really small, lightweight system so I can get my drums to and from gigs. That makes things a lot easier for me. And dealing with all those ins and outs, all those non-musical things, understanding that you call an Uber to put your drums in trunk, they might not fit in the trunk, you got to put them in the back seat, knowing how all that kind of stuff works. And beyond that is, the music stuff, the more specific stuff is to be successful in New York City, be out finding the people you want to be around and want to play with and want to associate yourself with. There are so many scenes in New York that are all running on like the highest level, you know, like what other place has the best Broadway musicians, the best jazz musicians, some of the best rock drummers, some of the best rock musicians, some of the best, you know, everything, you know, all in one place. You know, getting back to Ulysses, when I first moved to New York, he said, go find your line, get in line, and wait. You know, now while you're in line waiting for your turn, you know, finding your people, finding some small gigs, working your way up through those experiences, saying yes to everything that you could possibly say yes to, so that you have the opportunity to play, have people hear you, get to learn all the things you have to learn about. In the time it takes to get from your home to the rehearsal or to the venue, there's like 50 lessons right there. You know what I mean? Before you even walk inside the room to play music with people, you know? So the more you're doing that, especially in the beginning, the more you're learning about how to be successful, how to feel successful, how to feel confident. You know what I mean? You know, when I first moved here, at least in my experience, I was like, man, everyone's so confident. Everyone's just walking, getting to where they have to be, doing their thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, man, how do you do that? But in no time, just like, you know, month 2 into taking the subway every day, I was like, yeah, that'll build some confidence, you know, dealing with whatever it is you have to deal with on that particular day, you know. But you have to love it. You have to really like being here.
Yeah, and I never forget, a friend of mine said, New Yorker will eat you up and spit you out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can definitely do that.
I'll tell you a really funny story. One of my first gigs in New York was October of 2011, and it was snowing. I was living in New York for 2 months at that point. Again, I'm from South Florida. So I'm like, if it's snowing in October, I am in so much trouble come February. So I had a gig that night, and I had to get my drums there. And I ended up finding the trains were all messed up, obviously. Took my drums. I ended up finding a yellow cab. It was just like sitting at the corner of my block. And I was like, I just like ran, or you know what I mean? Threw my drums in the trunk, got to the gig, played the gig. After the gig, still snowing, packed up my drums. I'm standing on the corner of, you know, 6th Avenue in the West Village. Packed, you know, everyone, you know, when it snows, everything goes insane. Like a cab or whatever stopped and said, "Oh, where are you going?" I was like, "Oh, uptown." And he's like, "All right, $50." And I was like, "No, I'm not spending $50." And I ended up finally found a yellow cab that used his meter. And I threw my drums in the trunk. I got home. I like paid for the cab. And I got my apartment. I was like, that was awesome. That was so cool. That was the best. I was getting snowed on. I know a cab wouldn't pick me up. And I just thought it was the best. That was a real good indication. And I'm like, this is where I'm meant to be, you know?
Okay, so if that happened to you now, would you say the same thing?
No, I'd spend $100 on an Uber and get home as quickly as possible.
That's funny. Oh man. So speaking of drums, what kind of drums do you normally use, and cymbals, other kind of gear do you like?
In town, I have vintage Ludwigs that I love using. I built a 16-inch field drum into a bass drum that I use for the majority of my gigs. I have like a 12-inch matching rack tom that I found all these drums separately, but they're all like these really nice kind of 50s WFL Ludwig mahogany finished drums. I took another 14 by 10-inch field drum in the same finish that I built into a floor tom, and then I found just like a regular 12 by 8 rack tom. So I have like a 4-piece kit and this nice kind of old kind of vintage Ludwig. Mahogany is really nice, beautiful sound. I have a matching snare drum That's like my main kit. I also have a 20-inch bass drum in the same finish. It's like a single tension, old vintage bass drum. I use that a lot too. And then I have like a 70s superphonic snare drum. So depending on the gig, I'll use one of those two snare drums or one of those two bass drums. But the 16 I use for virtually everything. I did an off-Broadway show. I use that, all the jazz gigs, all the things. Sometimes like rock gigs I'll use if it's like, maybe not a big room, but if it's something where I need to just bring in, I could use that 16 for almost everything. But the 20 is nice to have too. So I have those two options. I don't have an 18. You think like all the jazz stuff, I have a 16 and a 20. Yeah, because I was like, I love this 16 and I feel like a 16 could do what an 18 could do. But an 18 can't really do what a 20 could do. So let me get a 16 and let me go find a 20. Those are my main drums, yeah.
What are the lengths of the bass drums?
The 16 is like 16 by 12 or 12 by 16, depending on how you like to think about it. And then the 20 is 20 by 14. Yeah. And then I have like a nice setup of vintage cymbals from like the 50s and 60s that I'll use for a lot of things. I have vintage A hi-hats to like a 20 and a 22, like 1950s A's. I really like A's more than K's. I know K's are very popular, but I like A's a lot. All those like early, Kenny Clark and Ed Thigpen and Art Taylor and all these like earlier, they were all using A's at one point. I love that sound. And not the only reason, but they are cheaper than K's. K's are much more popular, so they're typically much more expensive. We're kind of in this nice world of vintage drums and cymbals lately that a lot of stuff has been around and available. So it's cool to find vintage cymbals. Then I have more modern Zildjian cymbals that I'll use for the musical theater and pop and rock stuff. So it's nice to kind of have the things I have and know exactly. I live in a New York City apartment, and I like to say I'm minimalist leaning, which is bizarre to say for a drummer, but I only have the things I'll get. If I really need it, I'll get it, but I'm not like some of my friends who I love, but I don't have like racks of cymbals at home and drums just towering over, you know what I mean? So I like to be very specific in my purchases and my finds and all that stuff. So
what projects are you working on right now? Anything?
So the Four Phantoms gig is the last 6 months has been a lot of traveling. We just did a filming of the show for PBS that's going to air in August.
Nice.
So for the last 6 months, it was a lot of that, preparing for that filming and all the gigs month to month that came up. We don't have too much right now until the fall. So in the fall, we'll go back out probably a lot more. Currently, I'm doing a lot of teaching, wrapping up the school years and playing a bunch of cabaret gigs in town, jazz gigs in town, just filling up the calendar when the phone rings kind of thing.
Where can people find you online?
Instagram for sure. I use Instagram the most. That's Steve Pick _drummer. I have a website too. Technically, I have one that's stevepicataggio.drummer.com, which is more or less an extension of my Instagram. It's got some info there, but I try to use Instagram for everything. I have some stuff on YouTube. I'm trying to post some more things on YouTube as well. And I took some YouTube shorts on there and some longer YouTube videos of performances and various things. It's hard, man. As you know, it's like, I don't know how to, it's 2024 and I could start learning how to edit and piece some things together. But between Instagram and YouTube, it's the most. So I was like, I like using Instagram. I'll just use that. And yeah, that's it, man. Otherwise, it's a good opportunity to put yourself out there and put out your playing. You get called for something and then a minute later, they'll follow you on Instagram. If you don't know each other, that's what I do. If like, oh, I want to call so-and-so for a gig, or I just got called from so-and-so for a gig, I'm going to go on Instagram and see who they are and see what they're about. And it's like, okay, cool. They sound good. Oh, they look like this. They talk like this. They post all these videos playing and cool. You actually could, if you are intentional and do a good job in that way, you could actually really put a lot of people at ease in terms of like hiring you.
Mm-hmm. So be careful what you put out there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, it was great to get to know you and to talk to you. And I can't wait to see this PBS thing of Four Phantoms.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. Thank you so much, Clayton. It's really an honor to do this. It was really fun.
Oh, no problem. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks so much. See you soon.
All right. Bye.